All aboard!
No, all aboard the hype train.
All aboard the hype train. Stacked episode 29.
Chris, get off the top of the train.
Chris, you're taking your shirt off and throwing in circles. What?
Why are you doing this?
All aboard the freaking hype train. It's me, Wario, driving the flinking train.
Take that alcohol out of his hand.
Wow, that was probably the coolest intro yet. Welcome everyone to Stacked episode 29. We're now the second episode into this new year of 2021. We're still in 2020. We're recording the last episode and this episode. We're recording them back to back. So we're still stuck in 2020. How is it, guys? 2 weeks in? What are we thinking? Pretty good? Pretty not good? I mean,
it was all good
January
until the
last
second.
year was pretty amazing, I gotta say. You know?
No, it wasn't.
You can never really tell a year's quality by the first month, you know? I know Chris and I had a pretty good January.
Yeah.
2020, but
Kobe died.
that was February.
Oh, was it? All right, then
January. Oh, no, it was January. It was January.
But Parasite won Best Picture in February, so.
So maybe it all wasn't for nothing. So.
But Green Book 2 is winning this year.
Is Green Book 2 coming out this year? Yes! Okay. Get ready to see that in theaters.
Bohemian Rocketman's also coming out. That's the crossover between the crossover concert film.
All right. So as you heard, the boys are here. We're all back.
We're all back
in this. Ethan, Brandon, Chris.
Can you place The Boys Are Back in Town right
now? No, that's copyright. How about you sing it? Sing it for us.
Never a new day. The boys are back in town.
Boys are back in town.
The boys.
The boys. All right. But guess what? We're not here to talk about 2021. We're actually here to talk about... Shut up! We're doing the episode now.
Oh.
We're not here to talk about an upcoming year. We're here to talk about a decade past. We are now going to start doing this thing probably once a month where we're going to analyze, like what we did with the best films of 2020, we're going to do what we think are the most quintessential films of that decade. And we're starting with the 2010s. So, fellas, it was hard enough to pick movies for a best of the year. What was it like going in for the most quintessential 3 films for an entire decade?
It was wickety whack, bro.
Oh, for listeners, Brandon's hat is sideways right now. He's going straight baller right now.
Listen, we're embracing a new year, a new me for now. I'm
oh my God!
Shut up. We're still in 2020.
I'm joking. But I mean, how did I approach this list? It was very difficult because there are so many great films, and of course, the ones that are sticking in my mind most are the films that led up to the 2020s. You know, like the films from 2017 to 2019. I feel like are some of the best films we've gotten, whether they were blockbuster movies or indie films. I really connected to a lot of them. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it was hard because I looked back at the beginning of the decade and I'm like, I only can choose 3. And none of the films at the beginning of the decade really spoke to me that much and like stuck in my high praises throughout the whole decade. It was like around the middle of the decade, and maybe this is because when I was a teenager and was like watching 50 to 100 films to 200 films a year, at that point, that I was like starting to see more than just what I was like comfortable with at that point. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it was just that the films of the latter half of the decade are just better. So yeah.
Chris, how did you decipher this?
For me, it was kind of like the main question I asked myself was like, what were the biggest events throughout the 2010s or biggest like cultural shifts or anything like that that really spoke to me? So I wanted to pick films that kind of reflect that 10 years of life for me, and like whether that's on a person, I tried to like distance my personal self, but kind of think like what were the 3 films that I would say are most representative of how the world shifted or was shaped in 2010s, and just like the things that fascinated me most And yeah, I'll get into that once we start talking. But I think we're all gonna have some really great picks. I mean, the idea is we have 10 years to pick from, and we're probably gonna go for the best of the 10 years. So I think we'll have a great selection this week.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the same page with you guys, where I didn't necessarily I didn't choose 3 films with like my favorites of the year. You know, I chose films that really like mirrored what this past decade's like culture, politics, achievements in filmmaking, achievements in the industry. Brandon's standing up on a chair right now. He's like looking like he's about to dive off. Oh nope, there he goes. Okay, he's okay. But yeah, so it's gonna be these films don't necessarily click together. You know, there's not really a uniform sort of thing for this crazy decade because so much stuff happened, both
speak for yourself,
inside and outside of the film industry, you know. But yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the picks. But first, let's of course run down the rules of the show. Once a week, we set a topic or theme and go our separate ways to construct our own 3-film stack. Then after a week, we come back here on the podcast and share our own stacks 1 film at a time. Then at the end of the show, we will mix and match our 9 films to make the ultimate decision on what quintessential 3-film stack we are checking out of this hypothetical video store. Brandon.
Yeah?
You have the immense honor. Do you realize how big of an honor this is that you get to kick off the best of the decade, the 2010s, stacked podcast with your first pick?
Yeah, I guess that's pretty cool.
Okay, then go for it. I kind of forgot this.
Wait, were we supposed to do a list? Shit.
Come on.
No.
Get on with it.
As I said, I picked a lot of more recent films. Apology. I might change one throughout the course of the podcast, but my first film has first in the title. It's First Reformed, baby.
First Man.
No,
Okay.
no,
First Cow.
no.
First 2020.
First Reformed.
Okay.
Oh, immediately disappointed looks.
I am not even looking at you.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'm disappointed.
What?
I thought that would be cheering.
Just as disappointing as a look is no look at all.
All Schrader. We talked about him a little bit on the last podcast, and this is a film that I saw in theaters, and it completely blew me away. I think it 2018, 2019? 2018.
Right.
2018.
And this is a film about Ethan Hawke's character, who's a priest, grappling with the privatization of his church, as well as the fact of his own faith and how that is tested by people around him in his community, as well as how the climate is going and how the world is. And it is a very despair-ridden film. This is by no means a happy feature, but it is one that I think captures this evolving perspective that the 21st century has accompanied us with. Like the internet's expansion, as covered in a film from 2010, The Social Network, has led to things and immense knowledge being spread. Some of it is false information, and some of it is very real information, but often the two get discombobulated. And in a sense, people are left lost and looking for faith. And I'm not a religious person. My friends know this. I don't love religious film too much. But First Reformed really struck a chord with me. I grew up Catholic, so I kind of got like the same vibe of growing up in this like church small community, and seeing this character go through a transitionary process as he learns more and starts to question more about religion, about the people at power here, and about his own faith. It really brings about a lot of good questions about humanity in this new age, in this new information age. Because even though this film takes place in a small town, and by no means did I grow up in a small town, it still was relatable and fascinating to watch. Like I felt like I was transported, even though it was a realistic location, to like New England where the film takes place. And like from beginning to end, I was like involved. I was never taken out of the film. I know that's not going to be the same for Ethan, but I still very much love the film, and I think it captures a lot of the despair that people were feeling in the back half of 2010s.
Yeah, great film. Great film. It's something that does need to be addressed in that decade of how do people of faith handle their faith in a world where religion has become so tied to like corporate mindsets, and like how corporations are sort of so self-destructive to our planet, you know? And you see Ethan Hawke go on this journey as, you know, a reverend, and how he deals like with this anger and like and characters who think about this stuff in a nihilistic and extremist way, you know? I a lot of people have made comparisons that this is kind of like sort of a Taxi Driver kind of like movie. I mean, it's Paul Schrader, you know, he wrote Taxi Driver. Paul Schrader is an amazing writer. I think my favorite parts of the movies were like the conversations the characters have, you know. Like Brandon said, what took away this film for me was that ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous, and it takes me out. It breaks the rules of the world that's been established this whole film, and takes you on this goofy ass meditation sequence, horrible green screen. So pathetic. Sorry, it's pathetic, but I still love the movie regardless of it. Ethan Hawke, maybe my favorite performance of his. I think I'd say yes. I think it's my favorite performance of him.
It's up there.
My namesake, by the way, everyone. Great
Daddy
film.
Hawk.
Yeah. And something that does need to be talked about this decade. Chris?
Yeah, I think this is like one of those films, like, I think the one word I would use to describe this film is sublime. It's very under the surface and in the best way possible. There's this line in the film that kept coming back to me after I watched it. It reads, "Will God forgive us for destroying his creation?" It reminds me a lot of Steve Buscemi's line in Spy Kids 2, which is
it's quite similar films, actually.
What was that line in Spy Kids 2?
Well, God,
does God stay in heaven because he
lives in
fear of what he's created?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, anyway, back to this movie. Like, yeah, I very much agree with Ethan in the sense of like, it's so like, it's an important film in the sense of how it comments on this like weird interconnection that for whatever reason has arisen between politics and politics, corporation, and religion, as though like these things are meant to be intertwined, even though you would think they wouldn't. It's a deeply existential and almost metaphysical piece. I think it's like it very much like it has that Paul Schrader sense of existentialism to it that I think you'll find in like Mishima, for example.
Yeah.
Ethan, I do agree with you in what you said about the infamous flying sequence.
Yeah.
It did take me out of the movie. I'm sorry, it did. I can't say you can't argue with that. It took me out. I can't control that.
But I can try. No, just kidding.
but yeah, I
Brandon's
mean,
like watching the movie with you. He's like, "Stay in it, Chris." He's like putting your face up to the TV.
It's like Clockwork Orange. Clockwork Orange, yeah. Like putting the things on my eyes. But yeah, like
you will like the scene in this movie.
The ending of that film,
however,
haunts me.
It's amazing.
That like I won't spoil it, but like there's imagery in this last sequence that's just so like visceral and explicit.
Oh,
the film,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The film's not very it's not a comfortable watch, right? And
it's not even very destabilizing.
And it's not even a colorful watch, but the starkness of the blacks and whites that are used throughout the film, like are so like good. Like I've never seen a grayer film be more beautiful.
But yeah, it's like that last scene like always just throws me for a loop, and like, you know, it really just makes you think like, oh fuck, like and then you're left kind of like to your own devices to kind of dissect and interpret it for yourself. And I think for a director to be able, like directors that are able to like holistically create a ambiguous ending that still leaves a lot of doors open but closes its narrative very tightly, is something I think can be very difficult. I think only like the best directors are able to do that. And I think Paul Schrader does it really well in here too. So yeah, I think it's a great pick, Brandon.
Thank you.
Okay, starting off strong. Start off strong. Chris, what is
Well,
your first film?
Brandon's gonna like this pick. Well, Brandon's gonna like all my picks, but he's gonna like this one a lot. So Brandon started off with a commentary on like this interconnectivity between religion and politics and
truth,
corporation and truth. I'm gonna switch the dial a bit. We're going into social economics, and how materialism and stuff like that has shaped the world. 2019 film, you saw it coming. Bong Joon-ho, Parasite. Do I have a double stack by any chance?
Can I decide?
Wow.
Can I decide?
Can you decide?
He'll come back to it. He needs a minute.
Well,
maybe once we start talking about it.
No.
All right.
I've got another choice that I have in mind.
So no double stack?
No, guys. Are you sure?
Yes, because although I think it is, let's see what happens.
Okay, let's see. Okay, let's start the discussion. So, directed by Bong Joon-ho, 2019 film. This won Best Picture, Best International Feature, Best Writing. It was a whole thing, and the world was. It was one of the happiest moments of 2020 when this film won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a film following the Kim family, who are on the cusp of poverty in contemporary South Korea. They begin to infiltrate a much more elite and prestigious family in the social economic ladder, and eventually they start replacing, some of the workers in their household. Eventually, insanity ensues. I can't get into what this film is really about and what happens without severely spoiling it, so I'm going to leave it there, because seeing this film blind was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in the theater. Brandon knows because he was looking at me when a big reveal happened, and he saw my jaw hit the floor and my posture like get raised up. And yeah, like, wow, what a masterful film. I mean, like, just perfectly executed through every part of its narrative, its characters, its cinematography, its editing. It's so precise and beautiful. But like beyond that, its themes were incredible. Like talking about how people from different areas of the social economic ladder treat each other, how we view one another as people, and how for whatever reason our economics status seems to, for whatever reason, determine your value in contemporary society. That's a very depressing thing to talk about, but it's presented in this incredibly entertaining but very thought-provoking way. And yeah, it's just like, it's so expertly crafted. I feel like every frame in this film was planned out. Actually, no, I know every frame in this film was planned out because I have a book
that book is so cool.
It storyboards the entire film all the way through perfectly, and it's all of Bong's drawings or whoever storyboard artist was. But it's a fantastic film. Brandon, I remember when we first watched this movie, I wasn't very warm on the ending. It's grown on me a lot, and that I've taken away that as my critique. So now it's one of my perfect films.
Oh,
so
that's a rare
thing. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, Brandon, this is your number 5 favorite movie? 6? Something like that?
Yeah, it's in my top 10 for sure. This is my favorite film of the 2010s. And you might be wondering, like, why didn't you double stack with Chris if this is like one of your favorite movies? I'm like, well, let's see. Like, I want to make our lists like kind of branch out from the norm. I'm not saying we can't have like similarities, but also maybe I'll want to use Parasite later, and I don't want to lock it in yet, like, because I know a double stack means locking it in. And the thing is with Parasite is this movie is just a perfect encapsulation of what the 2010s were leading to. Like, paired with First Reform, that's like a perfect double feature in my opinion. You've got this film that tackles classism and sociopolitics from the perspective of multiple different classes, and it doesn't make anybody out to be the villain, but it makes the idea out to be a villain. The way that people have sort of treated each other because of a system that isn't really built on human kindness or connection. And that's like very lacking in society today because of the internet. That barely plays a role within this movie, but technology does in a sense.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
Well, and First Reform does that too. But what Parasite does is it takes it from a different perspective. And it's a very funny film, but it's a very dramatic film. But you can care for every character in this movie, whether they're rich or poor. You can relate to them and their struggle to be a good family member, their struggle to want to be something that they're not. I mean, it's literally, it's one of those most perfect movies. I'm not quite ready to say that yet because I've only had 2 movies that I think are perfect. But it is one that has, I think, spoken to me, and I think that captures that divide that you're seeing in this country. Not just our country, but like the whole world. This is a very universal movie. Like, it's not just a East versus West sort of thing. This is a very universal one.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you brought up the comparison to First Reform, because I think one thing that these films are united in is their use of environmentalism as a part of their themes.
Yeah.
It's not especially in First Reform for sure, but like it's slightly more sublime in Parasite. But like one example I think is like, obviously in First Reform you have the environmental aspect of it because, you know, God creation, his creation being the earth.
Yeah.
But with for example, say with Parasite, you have one of the great examples, I think, is there's a line where there's this moment where rain is pouring down across South Korea. It's almost like a monsoon. The poor family's home is very much in shambles and everything. Meanwhile, the rich family are sitting cozy up in their little house, and they say the line like, oh wow, like the rain's great, like yada yada yada, like it's so relaxing. And then the next morning, while the poor family is doing everything they can to piece together their broken home, the rich family's like, oh wow, the rain was so fortunate, we now have clear skies for the birthday party. So it's almost like the difference in perspective that even the environment causes within the social economic ladder. Like, it's almost so interconnected with everything that we exist in now. I don't know, I think that's just a really interesting like comparison between the two films. Ethan, what do you think about Parasite?
I mean, you two sort of like tackled everything perfectly. I think one thing that we're going to be talking a lot about this decade is sort of like this sort of revitalization of Marxist thought in the popular culture sphere. I feel like that's the 2010s sort of reinvigorated it for a lot of people, especially our generation during this decade, you know? And I mean, and I think a lot of that has to do with the success of films like Parasite, you know? Yeah, everything you talked about, like it's classist, not so underlying themes, you know? It's quite prevalent, but it's perfectly captured by Bong Joon-ho. And I just think the most impressive thing about this movie to me is how fucking meticulous it is, you know? Like,
yeah,
that book blew me away when I looked at it at your apartment, and it just fucking makes sense because everything has a purpose in this movie. Every single prop, you know, every detail in the set, every camera angle and shot, you know, it all someone could write a 300-page book on what everything in this movie means, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's how well thought out it was by Bong Joon-ho, and it deserved everything it got at the Oscars. I'm so happy that this was like the foreign film to sort of like break that mold and win Best Picture, you know? And yeah, I completely understand why it's one of the most significant movies of this decade. God damn. All right.
I don't know, man.
You don't know?
I mean, I think it's, never mind. Well, I'll talk to you about it after the podcast.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. 2 really great thought-provoking films to kick off the podcast, but I'm going to change gears a bit.
Oh, dear God. What are you going to do?
Sonic the Hedgehog. No, just kidding.
Sonic the Hedgehog. No, that's a 2020 movie. Anyways, Brandon. Maybe next decade, buddy. Maybe next best of decade. No, this is a movie that sort of resembles like the highlight of what the film industry was like in this decade.
Instant
and what
Family.
Blockbuster filmmaking.
Yes.
This is the poster child for it, and the thing that's kicked it all off.
Yeah.
It is a 2012 film.
Yeah.
Directed by Joss Whedon. It's the first Avengers.
Oh.
Not Captain America, the first Avenger. It is the Avengers.
Avengers Assemble for all you foreign audiences out there.
For all you fucking foreigners. Chris, was it Avengers Assemble for you when you saw it in Hong Kong?
No, it was the Avengers.
Yeah, so shut up, Brandon.
I didn't.
Who you calling?
Mom, come pick me up. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
No, but everyone knows exactly where they were when they saw this movie for the first time.
I remember.
You know what I'm saying? I was at the
Saw it
Century
in the
16.
church.
You saw it at a church?
No, I'm joking.
Oh, I was at the Century 16 on 13th South, I think. 1300 South, not 13th South. With my boys, my friends in middle school, and friend of the show, Milo. He saw it with me for the first time. And then we went to Wasatch Pizza. But that has nothing to do with the film. While I don't think this film has aged as well as the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I do think it has to be acknowledged as, for better or for worse,
the catalyst.
It's the film that sort of, the catalyst, of blockbuster filmmaking in this decade and probably for the foreseeable future, for the foreseeable future. Mike Sully.
Kill him.
No, but
you guys really
Put
look
him
like
down.
them to me.
Put him down.
Put him down. Put me down. This film is just, it's a load of fun. What can I say?
Zoinks.
It was insane seeing a crossover like this on the big screen. Brandon, you talked about crossovers.
Gabagool.
I think during After Hours, you talked about the appeal of crossovers.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the biggest ones. We were like, it was insane to see someone do this. Have each of these films set up and then a payoff of all of these characters, main characters in their own films, come together in this huge film that actually worked.
Okay.
Made $1 billion. I remember it was insane seeing that it made $1 billion,
Because there weren't many films to that point that had made like over $1 billion, right?
No,
there was like
not
10.
many. There's like 20 now, since this came out. But like, it was like Avatar, Titanic, The Dark Knight,
Jurassic Park,
yeah,
and
like,
one of the Lord of the Rings movies, I think.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. It was a very small and exclusive list, and to have a film that the box office receipts for the past Marvel Cinematic Universe was good, but not huge. Each movie was like in the 700 to 800 million range of profit, and this one, I remember it was just a shock to the world of how many people were so interested in this idea that now you see it. You see people now, studios, each studio wants a cinematic universe, Each studio wants to build up to a crossover film because they see how much of a profit they can make off of that, because people are super fascinated by the premise of a crossover. Has anybody ever written I would love to read something about the appeal and an analysis of the crossover, and
I'm sure there's a psychoanalytic take you can go. There's a path on that.
I think it's just exciting to see characters you're familiar with in two different things pushed together, because, for example, there's a backing between the Avengers. The Avengers were a comic book, right? So it's a natural. Oh yeah, no, it wasn't. No, but that's a natural transition because that's what's expected. That's how the comic book is. But with other cinematic universes, for example, I'll go back to this, CG animation. Let's do Nickelodeon. They crossed over Jimmy Neutron and Timmy Turner. And one is a CGI character and one is a 2D character. And that is super exciting because it's you get to see your character interact with another one of your favorite characters. And not only that, but cross over into the other one's universe and sort of play with a new and unique story that you really never could have expected. It brings about amazing possibilities. And it's that instant gratification that you get out of seeing characters you love interact, or characters you love interact with the worlds around them, that allows there to be this excitement surrounding it. It's almost indescribable, but it's a tad about nostalgia. It's got to be, right?
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, when I gosh, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's when I first saw this film, I had no idea the repercussions that would happen as a result of this film's existence. I think when I first saw the Avengers, it was just so like foundational for the industry. It changed so much about how our industry functions nowadays. Like you said, with the universe, with like every studio now wants their own universe that they can immerse all of their characters in and whatnot. So it's like, you know, back in 2012 when I sat in that theater and watched this movie and I fell in love with the Avengers and everything, I never would have known. I never could have known that like, this would start one of the biggest like financial and cultural shifts in like the film industry, like in many, many years. And like, I mean, like, whether or not you think that like as a person, like, do you think that was a good thing or a bad thing for the industry? That's too big a call for me to make. And seeing as I'm a big fan of the Marvel characters, I'm very biased.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you can't deny that was a foundational moment for the industry, regardless of whether or not you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's why this is a very valid pick, even though it might look a little unorthodox to begin with. But yeah, I think it's very valid.
You're right on that.
Good pick. Good pick, Ethan.
I mean, like, looking at the film, like, I remember seeing this opening night on, like, a Wednesday evening, like a 6 or 7 o'clock showing. And I had just gotten into the Avengers comic books, like, when I was 8 or 9. So, and then and Mightiest Heroes came out. And, like, that was, like, when I really familiarized myself with comic book characters and comic books. And, like, I really attached myself to specific ones, like Ant-Man and Captain America. Those were my like 2 favorite heroes growing up, which is I think why Ethan and I initially got along, because we could kind of relate to in that respect.
Yeah.
But I mean, the seeing it on the screen, big screen in live action, was like watching sort of a dream come true. But outside of that, it still was like a great film. Like, I think it was one of my first like movies that I would consider like one of my favorites. Like, this used to be in my top 5.
This used to be my number 1 film of all time.
Really?
When I saw it in 7th grade, I'm like, this is it, the number 1 film.
and I mean, I think you were right in assuming that at like 12 or 13, right?
Yeah, when you're right. It's amazing when you're 12 or 13.
Well, I mean, and I it was amazing then, but because of I think because Marvel's branched out and made more original stories and grander spectacle films, it's like almost like narratively everything's been surpassed in Phase 1, because it's not just cookie cutter origin stories anymore. They have good themes, but they're not as good as the rest. And then the later films are like far more visually stimulating and exciting because of the buildup that's been created. But seeing that first one, I've never been so like, other than like Endgame, like that event film. I can't remember a time in my life before that was like that exciting and crazy. Being in the theater, it was like every seat was filled, like even the front row that nobody likes to sit in. And people were like cheering in the theater, and like the character interactions were so perfect and unexpected. And you were like watching a magnum opus being spread. Now, there's problems with the pacing significantly with that movie. But I mean, I still hold on to that same excitement I felt, even though I know there are portions of this movie that really don't work.
Yeah, same here.
All right, well, there's my film. Brandon. Who are you? Brandon.
Yo, what's up?
Who are you?
Where am I?
All right.
Talk about a movie.
What? Well, I'm gonna go a little different route. I'm gonna pick a 2013 film.
Are you fucking kidding me?
If you don't want me to, I guess I won't.
Skip
it.
It's
fine. No, you're done. No, my turn.
Next.
Fine.
No 2013 films. That was the rule.
Really?
Yep.
Can I replace it?
Talk about 2013
Okay. All right. I was gonna go the Bong Joon-ho route as well. Why are you giving me confused looks, children?
What came out in 2013?
It's a little.
Snowpiercer?
Yes.
Oh.
Snowpiercer.
Oh, okay.
His first English language production, and his best so far, because I mean the other one's Okja. So. Yeah, and honestly, Snowpiercer is this. I think it's like the first draft of Parasite, because it tackles classism from left to right, back to front, sort of thing. But it also plays upon the environment. So it's kind of like a mixture of First Reformed and Parasite in that sense, because it is very much a
Oh,
film about classism, getting to the front of the train in life, and people putting each other down because they just have the power and the advantages early in life, you know. And then the environmental message comes from humanity's arrogance, and that is still very much seen in the way people act within the train, between separate classes and different cars. Like there's like a certain attitude people have as this thing goes on. And I remember seeing this movie and thinking, as this goes on, I feel more and more immersed in the environment, and like I feel cold during this and I feel disgusted. But at the same time, I feel moved by the characters in this film and their interactions with the world around them. This is another film that's kind of like desperation based. And I don't want to like say like the 2010s were hell, but like we're transitioning into this point in history where there's a lot of uncertainty, and how we deal with that uncertainty is through films about a very bleak certainty, such as with Snowpiercer, Parasite, and First Reformed.
yeah, great. Also, an adaptation of a graphic novel, something that you would see a lot of this decade. You know,
Yeah.
this was such a great film. I'd say one of the best video game films, even though it's not based on a video game. Just the way the whole film is paced is like you're playing a great video game with these protagonists that you're following, going from streetcar to train car to train car. You know, not streetcar named Desire to streetcar named Desire. No, um, each
Cancel.
each train car was sort of like a different level, and sort of you learned new things about the characters, or you saw like a new spectacle in each little action sequence. I just loved it. And yeah, Brandon, you nailed it on the head with its environmental messages. And like Bong Joon-ho is a really good director at making classist themes like be good but not subtle, like visually, like literally having the sort of the chain of class be displayed as an actual train, you know, with
Yeah.
you know the lower class being in the back and the higher class in front, etc.
Like a
But
visual metaphor.
visual metaphors, lots of visual metaphors. Bong Joon-ho, that clever guy. Uh, yeah, fun time. I remember being so surprised when I saw this for the first time. I think I saw it, probably saw it at home. I think.
I
I
saw
think
it
it
in
was like it was
theaters.
very select theaters in 2013, and then it was like uh, big wide release at home 2014. That's when I saw it, but still loved it regardless. You know, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic film. I like Brandon, you nailed it on the head when you were talking about how like Bong's use of the train as a concept, and just how like moving through the trains up to like the elite status, which is by the front, like just being able to like like visualize that as a construct and use that to reflect upon how it works in real life. It's so interesting to just be able to like see basically what is a cacophony of our world like encapsulated into one singular train, pretty much. And like the compartments being like steadily growing, and like how like grand each one is, and like, you know, just being able to see that progression is so great. I think I think stuff like that is what makes Bong's films so complex but also still very accessible.
There's a,
I never feel like polarized by his films.
Yeah.
there's also a like religious extremism angle you could sort of take with the film, in the sense of
Oh yeah.
this is like a version of Noah's Ark.
Yes.
If Noah was like a terrible person, and instead of packing, oh, two animals here, two animals here, he's like, no, we're gonna put all these people near the back, and then all these other people are gonna live comfortably. And this is the first movie that I remember watching that really like made me like reconsider economics, the way we've been doing things, because I saw parallels. And I'm not saying that we should transition into a full such and such government or a full such and such economy, but it shows that the system is broken in so many different ways. And how are we going to repair it? It's very overwhelming, but it gives the viewer inspiration to think of solutions to those problems before it gets to be that bad.
Right.
Fucking Willy Wonka too. Great inspiration.
Will. All right.
All right.
Willy Wonka, whatever. No, I'm just kidding. Great comparison. All right, Chris, take us in your second pick.
Cool. All right. Well, My next one, we're switching back over to like very like contemporary themes, addressed through film. And this was this subject. Okay, so the subject that I chose was, as you guys know, I'm very passionate about this. It's like the Black experience and identity politics. As you guys know, that's a big thing for me. And there were so many films, of course, to choose from, but the one that, and I kept going back and forth between like three, but I ended up choosing one because this was the most visceral experience I've had with this concept, and it was basically the film that got me interested in this. And I think a lot of people kind of awoke into what's going on with this film. It's a 2013 film directed by Ryan Coogler. It's his
Oh.
directorial debut, Fruitvale Station.
Oh.
The other films that I was going to pick instead were either going to be Get Out or Blind Spotting, both of which are masterpieces. But I ended up going with this one just because of my personal connection to it.
Mm-hmm.
So this film tells the true story of the last day of Oscar Grant, a real person who was murdered by the police in San Francisco on New Year's Day in 2009, I believe. Yeah, so wow, this was a very, very painful movie to watch and also very emotionally tiring film to watch. I remember the first time I saw it was in the Felino Theater when we were freshmen doing film aesthetics. I believe that was the class. And that movie broke me. I remember just being so shell shocked by it. And like, usually like at the screenings in the Felino, students, they start to file out after a screening, kind of, just chatting with each other. But I've never seen the Felino so quiet. Everyone walked out in complete silence and no one knew what to think or what to say, especially people who have never seen that film before. And yeah, this was a great, great piece. I think like they do, like Ryan Coogler, now is directing Black Panther and Black Panther 2, both of which are arguably the biggest Black experience films in the modern day, like, just in terms of accessibility and people knowing about it and everything. And yeah, this was his directorial debut, and he did an incredible job. He humanized Oscar Grant in this way that is so like understandable and beautiful. And like I understood, like he has had a rough life. He has a daughter. He has a wife, and like you get to know him on a human level. And like that's the important part, because like it's almost like we're taking a step back from race for a second there, and we're getting to know this guy on a level that like I know this guy. He is a human being. And then the fact that he was killed over nothing more than the color of his skin, it's outrageous, completely outrageous. And that's the reaction that you get out of it, because you feel so upset and angry because you know this guy almost. And like, there's been a little bit of discourse about like whether or not the movie like deifies Oscar Grant as like something that he wasn't. But at the same time, the effect that this film had upon so many people and the world's understanding of the Black experience, and I think at least for my understanding of the Black experience, like it really awoken me to something that I never, like, even though I was aware of it, I was never fully cognizant of how systemic of an issue it was until I saw this film. And I don't know, like this really shook me. Like, how about you guys? What was your experience like with this film?
Yeah, I think we got to be careful with the word humanizes when we're talking about these sort of characters. I totally see what you mean. Like, I think it humanizes Oscar in a sense where this person has become such a big symbol for a movement, and I think that that sort of happens a lot to so many Black lives during this movement. It's like I think a lot of people used. I mean, last year I think a lot of people used George Floyd's name without really knowing anything about it,
Exactly.
And I think this film was trying to do that. I love that. I mean, this is going to be quite a significant film if we follow the career of Ryan Coogler, and seeing like he's going to become one of the greats. I think he's playing the game. He's making the blockbusters, but he also keeps his own personal touch to every film that he makes. And you see that in this film with like I feel like a little bit of neorealism. It's a little slice of life. And it's just the movie's a ticking time bomb, from the very beginning, and it's just it's a beautiful film, beautifully tragic, like you said when we watched it in the Felino. it was powerful. It was very powerful. Brandon.
I had seen this movie before we saw it in the Flino, and I loved it then. And I thought, like, I mean, if you weren't attuned to the stuff that was happening beforehand, like, I totally like understand that, because obviously a lot of people either weren't in tune with the news, or like obviously you were focused at different things at a different age. But for me, it was like I remember, like, I think it was the summer after Fruitvale Station came out, like in 2014, 2015. There were like images of all over online, and it was the first time where Facebook was starting to like censor content for like because they violated their guidelines because people posted videos and pictures of things happening. And that was like the first time that I think I became not just aware, but like physically like moved into action by these problems that have faced like society for so long. And the problem is there's just so many roadblocks, and that, I mean, it's moved me into like the political atmosphere, into journalism, to find out the truth about things like this, because honestly, like, that's the hardest thing nowadays. And to really get answers and find solutions is really important to me. um yeah, it's a very great film, very stark. Michael B. Jordan's probably is one of his best performances.
I'd say
um
so.
and like, there's not, this film does feel very neorealist in a sense, but it never loses like its hope and optimism, despite you knowing how cynical and bad the ending is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I want to be careful with what I say here, but there is also a discourse about sharing videos of like Black lives getting
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
killed.
They
And I,
showed at the end, right?
right. And not only that, but that's been going around since the Black Lives Matter movement this year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I kind of want to like say, is it weird that the film, it's not that the film like obviously fetishizes this idea or tries to make it like a spectator thing, but because we see it, I I I don't want to see much more films like this. Like, I don't want to see in 20 years a film about George Floyd. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like this would just, it stands out so much that it like, I just want it to be like the representation and be special for what it is and what it captures, you know?
No, I completely see what you mean. It's sort of like, um, yeah, like that footage is very traumatic for a lot of people, you know, um, and I think the filmmakers have to be, you know, aware of that if they want to put that, and sort of that's sort of like forcing people into putting them into an uncomfortable situation, not sort of uncomfortable in a cinematic sense of like a horror movie or something like that, but this is like real world uncomfortable, you know, that just filmmakers have to be aware of. I don't know, it's not, I think it's used effectively in this film personally, but I can totally see if people saw that ending as something as like glorification, you
Yeah,
know.
Yeah, I
exactly.
think like that's something I think we briefly talked about it in like maybe our film theory class or something, because I've written about this film before, I think at least twice, and like I think that's a very interesting part of the discourse, and like it's definitely, I definitely agree that like I don't want to see like a George Floyd film like 5 years from now or something like that, because like this film already stands as the embodiment of what those films should be.
Yeah.
It's like it's the explicit, this is what happened, here you
It
go.
would just feel like
Like,
a cash grab, and
yeah,
it
and I
shouldn't
don't
be about
I would
that.
hate to disrespect like the tragedy that was like all of those like murders and everything, and like that's like you know um I would hate to just see that. And I think um yeah, it's great that this film exists, but I think this is where, like, call it here, I think, and then just
Yeah.
give
There are
the
other ways to
resources.
tackle.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a biographical film. It could be like I said, Blind Spotting and Get Out are great examples of contemporary ways to do this.
Right.
And yeah, that's my second pick.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so my second pick, let's see, we're going a little long on time here, so I'll try to go through it pretty quickly, but um this is a film that I think perfectly resembles the relationship between content and form, and sort of this uh, growth and accessibility in filmmaking that the 2010s has offered filmmakers, and how that has been able to express more diverse stories,
Hmm.
um, from more stories that studios wouldn't necessarily like tend to make, because various reasons of the system and capitalism and everything like that. But this is a 2015 film directed by Sean Baker. This is his debut feature film,
Uh,
Tangerine.
Hmm.
Now, uh, recently I've done some more digging on the film. Our friend Tori has shown me some articles about how this film doesn't really do a very good job at um, sort of depicting the trans lifestyle towards the end of the film, where it sort of shows some traumatic stuff that made a lot of people uncomfortable, a lot of the people in the trans community uncomfortable. But it's a lot like what we talked about with Soul, where I think it was just, I don't know, it's directed by a heterosexual cisgendered white male, but from the research that I've done on the film, because I presented on it in a class, uh, he cooperated a lot with the trans actresses in this movie, the main two. They helped him shape the story, really, and the world of these streets of Hollywood. Um, this is also a very neorealist film, I believe. Like, it's really grounded, and you can see that in the technology. It's shot on an iPhone, which is like, it was insane at the time. Came out in 2015. Brandon's just pogging. He's like, iPhones, buggers, he's like, I can make movie on my phone,
I'm making movie right now.
Yeah. The stack movie. No, but I don't know. It's just like, I totally understand the discourse going around this film, but it I feel like it is significant for the decade that it, like I said, with its relationship of content and form, and how that's been able to make more diverse stories than what we've seen in decades past. Have you guys seen Tangerine?
No,
Any thoughts?
no.
Movie thinks,
I've
feelings?
I've
No.
seen Sean Baker's other film, Florida Project, which I really loved, which is also very similarly a very realist film. I don't think, obviously, it's not all shot on an iPhone, but it does choose to do things that are very like independently based. And I do
Yeah.
think that Tangerine brought about this new era of digital filmmaking and indie filmmaking, because now you're starting to see like films utilize the technology like iPhones to make features, or utilize only specific like singular locations to broadcast its like message and topic. And
Yeah.
also, it's a film about the queer LGBT community, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is this is something that Hollywood has been scared of forever to tackle in mainstream features. And yes, Tangerine's not mainstream. Um, but in terms of like what we've been getting, it's like so much more than the 2000s, which just had like Brokeback Mountain and a little bit of J. Edgar, and that's about it.
Yeah, of actually cisgendered characters playing trans people in the very
Right.
few films about trans people, which is
Exactly.
not okay. But now here we get to see people who actually live that life, have access to filmmaking technology, and work uh, with directors like Sean Baker to convey these stories.
Exactly.
Chris, I know you actually presented a lot on like this sort of technology in one of our film
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah, I guess like the one thing I think I can add to this conversation is about how, like, because I haven't seen this film, but one thing that like very much rippled throughout the industry and just the entertainment industry as a whole is like how this film proved that like going forward, film as an art isn't going to be completely reserved for people who went to film school, who know how to use an amazing camera, who know how to do all this crazy shit. Because now it's like you can make a film that's just as valid as any other with nothing more than your iPhone, a couple actors, and a decent script or something. Or maybe not even a script if that's not your style. But like, yeah, it's like, now we have like mediums like YouTube. We have, I hate to say it, but TikTok. We have all this other
Yeah.
stuff where like moving images are coming to life and being able to tell stories in a way that once seemed to be only reserved for the individuals that were able to afford it or skilled enough to use those tools. But now it's a lot more accessible. And, the world is shifting towards streaming. The world is shifting towards, being like the accessibility of cinema is no longer something that is reserved. It's something that's accessible for everyone. And Tangerine was a fundamental piece in what made that possible. It was very much the figurehead in a way of the of the thing that enabled everyone to be able to pick up their phone and hit record and make a little something, even if it looks like crap. It's like, it's still a movie.
Yeah.
It's moving images. That's all you ever need to make a movie. So yeah, I think this is like in that level at least. And on top of all the other things that you guys were talking about, but of course I don't have any input on that because I haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a multitude of reasons why this film deserves to be recognized as one of the most significant of the 2010s, because it shaped so much of what the 2010s became and what's going to happen going forward in the 2020s.
Well said. Well said. All right, let's get into this final round here. Let's run through it, Brandon, with your last pick.
Our film. Our last film. My last film.
Yeah, not mine. Hey, fuck you.
Maybe.
Maybe it could be.
2018. Blind Spotting.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. I told you I didn't pick that, yeah. I came close.
Yeah,
but
this movie,
fantastic.
I think, is another one where it's like, Chapman alum, hello.
Woo, Carlos.
The best thing to come out of Chapman, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
This movie is just so multi-layered and original and unique because it takes all of this knowledge that we have about not just the Black Lives Matter movement, but about racial relations in general, as it goes back to like the 1980s and 90s and even some of the 60s, right? And you see this built up anger and resentment and even like poser, like imposter syndrome between white people, black people, Hispanics within one community in a very diversity of Oakland. And Oakland is so diverse, it's so split up between like all of these many different cultures and ideologies, but they also at the same time feel distinct, and like there's a evolution going on, a transitioning, as you will. But also there's a critique of the way that society, especially white society, gentrifies areas and essentially kicks out the people who are native to that land. And this is consistent through all of American history, but it's most recognizable today in the form of suburbs and such. And the way the film is able to tackle all of these racial issues throughout this one very diverse community. We're talking about gentrification, we're talking about police brutality and racism, and we're talking about, just racial relations in general. It's very fluid. It never feels like it's being too preachy, and it's so visceral and real. I was just taken aback by how much this film has not only grown on me, but impacted my life going forward. Because I really didn't think this would be a film that I would love this much when I saw the trailer.
Yeah, very much a hidden gem of 2018. It got no Oscar consideration, which is a crime. And I remember Brandon raving about it, and I saw it in theaters. And this is a very special film when it comes to sort of gentrification being explored in real time between these two friends. One's white, one's black, and one David Diggs sort of realizing like sort of his complicated relationship with his friend, and it's a beautiful film. I think it uses community well in it. I think it uses like all sorts of other art forms well. I mean, when that rap that he does at the end to the police officer, that's probably my favorite scene in the movie. Yeah. If you haven't seen Blind Spotting, if you haven't seen Blind Spotting, go park your car in the Harvard Yard and go check it out. All right. So I'm telling you to do. Go see it. Chris, what do you think about Blind Spotting?
I dig this movie so much. I think one thing that we didn't mention very much is this movie's also fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
It's such a fun movie to watch. They're so funny. David Diggs and
Rafael
Raphael
Casal.
Casal, like they are fantastic
What a
together.
duo.
And
Yeah.
yeah, are they making a TV show for Blind
Yeah.
Spotting?
That's going to be so interesting.
Yeah, and Raphael and David are back to produce or something, or working on it. I don't know
I
if
think
they're
they're
working on.
starring. I think
Are they starring?
I don't know what it is. If it's a direct sequel or if it's like a miniseries sort of remake of it.
Oh,
Right.
Because
that's
I think it has the potential. I'm just nervous, because whenever they make something this good, I'm always nervous. I know it's with the real
yeah,
creators and such, but
Yeah.
yeah. Is Carlos returning to direct?
I don't think so. But I think he's
Okay.
executive producing.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, I think like, Brandon, you were talking about how this movie is like talking about gentrification, racism, and just like how that's kind of shifted in this modern era. It's less explicit. It's a lot more implied, and there's more like, what's the word? I think it does a great job with talking about microaggressions in contemporary racism, and like how, it hasn't really been like racism hasn't been solved or eviscerated. It's been shifted. It's transformed into this other thing that like is just so like, at least within the context of this film, is a lot more subtle. And of course there are much worse things going on elsewhere, but yeah, that is like talking about this contemporary level that racism has like become. It's so interesting because like you don't really see that get addressed very often. And another thing is, I think they do a great job of talking about identity politics, about how like you're when you see someone and you make some form of a preconceived judgment on their character based on their skin color and like where you think they're from, like, and that's something I experience every now and then. When someone sees me, they don't think I can, sometimes I've felt like people judge the way I behave because of the way I look, but like I don't behave that way,
Right.
or I behave quite differently from the way you might interpret me in behaving. So it's like, I think it's a great way of showing how identity is shifting so much in this contemporary era. The world is diversifying so much that it's almost impossible to tell, like who someone is just by looking at them. And it never has been that easy, but it's especially now. It's like no one's ever from where you think they are. And everyone grew up in a context that you are not familiar with, and you probably have no idea what that's like. I think it's a great film about judgment, great film about all those things. And like, yeah, I was enamored by this film when I first watched it.
Isn't it weird how the world is more interconnected than ever? But
And yet
we have like a film that tackles that idea, and that kind of tackles the same idea we were talking about in our last episode about racial bias sensitivity and such, that kind of training. And
Yeah.
you seeing like it's still difficulty for people to understand that. Not necessarily our generation, I don't think, but any generation that precedes millennials. Because I feel like there's this understanding around identity, race, sexuality, etc., that has come to be implied and understood quite directly. And I don't know why that is. I think it's just more accepting by nature. But
So true. Did you guys know that Carlos Lopez Estrada is co-directing Raya and the Last Dragon?
Oh
Wait,
shit.
what?
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
I mean, that's what it says on Letterboxd, but I had no idea he was co-directing that.
Yeah,
I thought
it's
he
a
was
great
doing it summertime or something.
yeah.
I thought that.
Yeah, he directed that, but he's also the co-director for that movie, I guess.
Yeah. Chapman alumni are killing it.
Popping off.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
yeah, and I mean, like, yeah, Justin Simeon's working on Lando, right?
Lando.
Yeah, and Stranger Things season 4. I don't watch it, but good for them.
Overrated.
All right, great final pick, Brandon. Chris, take us in your last pick.
All right. Well, my final pick. 3 of us actually watched this movie together. Mine and Ethan's first time was watching this. We watched it. Brandon showed it to us. It was his movie night. We watched it at your place, Ethan, for Valentine's Day.
Oh.
2014 film David Fincher, Gone Girl is my final pick.
Okay.
Now,
cool.
Joey.
Why am I talking about this film? But I think it does a great job with talking about so many different things, but like abstraction of truth, perspective, gender roles, marriage relations, contemporary relationships, like how all of this interweaving between all these different concepts is explored is so masterful by Fincher. I think this is it's not my favorite of his, but it's definitely his second best. but yeah, I adore this film. I think it's so well executed, perfectly acted, enchanting, and just so you're so engaged throughout it because you're also along for the ride with the mystery of how this is unfolding. Um, Everyone is so on point with like, did Aaron Sorkin write this? It feels like an Aaron Sorkin script
I
in
don't
the
think
best
he.
way, in
No,
the
he
most
No.
did not.
complimentary
He
way
did
possible.
not.
All right, but like, yeah, it has like fantastic dialogue, great, just like it's so, it just moves like this, and it's just so like interesting to me, like how a film that's really just about a husband and his wife and the infidelities of their marriage brings out a discussion on so many different things that pervades our society and the way we as humans interact with each other. How do we define what is true? How do we define like perspective, and how does that play into what's true? um think like marriage and everything, like how does your relationship change based on things like that, and how does the world interpret you based on the images that they see that may not necessarily be an accurate depiction of who you are? Like, I don't know, it's like it almost feels like this film was made by a guy who like really just saw into something that I think I've never been cognizant of, but has always been a part of the way the world works. I think Fincher tapped into something that we've all recognized but never really registered.
Right.
Brandon, you're a big fan of this film. Like, what do you have to say about it?
I've heard the first half of the book, and
Mm.
I was trying to read it before the movie came out because I was really anticipating this. It looked great from the trailers, and I got to the part right before the middle section where we find out something. I don't want to spoil it. But when you find out that something, it turns your whole expectation and thing on your head. But I didn't get to that part in the book. So when I went into the movie, I was just fuck crazed out of my mind. My mouth was dropped on the floor. It was like as shocked as I was in Endgame. Um, it was just like, what? This is crazy. I can't believe they did this. Yeah, look at that, Ethan.
I can't believe you've done this.
My jaw literally touched the ground, bro.
I just the 2010s may be a bleak era, but that's because they capture the realities and damages that society has gone through. I think relationships, the evolution of relationships into the 21st century is very interesting. The way marriage has kind of been this evolving like concept with people, because some people are like, we are the marriage type, but then there's a lot of people who are like, that's not I know what my parents went through, or I've seen this happen to my friend, and that's not cool. And like that sort of abusiveness is kind of on display here from both sides. And that's a really fascinating thing to discover, because usually it's only one doing the other harm, but in this case it's actively both. And then outside of that, there's that whole notion of Chris, and another reason is this whole notion of truth. That there's this fascinating nature of like, once you know the truth of the film, it's really hard to unsee the way you saw it, the way you see it from then on. It's kind of like blind spotting in that sense, and that when they face vase,
Mhm.
and like can only see a picture one way one time, they can't see both pictures at the same time.
Yeah.
And from that perspective onwards, you're forced to contemplate what truth means, what honesty means, and what relationships mean going forward. And I just love this film. It's so smart. I've never seen a mystery this enthralling before.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, real quick note
Yeah.
for me. Like, I just really love what you said about how, when you do know what the actual truth of what happened throughout this narrative, you start to reflect on how you viewed the characters going throughout the story. You start to like, oh my god, I was siding with this guy. I believed that. I believe this. I believe that. And then you start to realize, like, wow, I am just as much a pawn in like, I'm as fooled as like the people that were like saying shit on TV in the context of the story. Like, I really believed things that they said or things that were implied, but never was the real truth.
It makes you confront your own biases about human
It
beings and your own
really does.
prejudices.
Right.
A lot of films this decade are great at doing that, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, I agree with everything you guys just said, and I'm just gonna quickly say that like the Gone Girl is a great example of this sort of decade's auteurism, you know, and sort of like how how a director's visual style like has developed, you know, because I feel like a lot what we see with these sort of newer auteurs that have come from this decade. Like, I mean, Fincher's been around since the 90s, and even earlier than that, you know, in the business. But as a director, like his pieces have been around since the 90s. But I feel like he's sort of uh, found a darker and sharper like visual aesthetic that's totally unique to his own, that I feel like is very much shown off in this movie, you know? And I think it's a good poster child. A lot of these 2010s auteurs like you know, Fincher, Denis Villeneuve,
Yorgos.
Yorgos Lanthimos. Like, we haven't seen the end of their careers, you know? We're probably either in the mid stages or the beginnings of a lot of them, you know? And that's something significant about this decade, and I think that this film is a good pick in that aspect. All right, let me finish this off with my last film.
No way.
I think it's a lot. It has a lot of what we've already talked about this episode, so this can be just a quick discussion. It's a 2018 film. It's a debut feature for director Boots Riley. It is Sorry to Bother You.
I thought Chris was going to do that earlier. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
Yeah, because he was describing his movie, and I was like, is it Sorry to Bother You?
Yeah, but he's like Blindspotting. But this, I mean, this shares a lot of what Blindspotting was talking about, a lot what Parasite was talking about, you know, a lot what Fruitvale Station was talking about, a lot of stuff that we've already talked about today. I just got to say, I love the way Boots Riley depicts sort of this modern Marxist thought through the working class, like a modern working class, and unionizing. Like, I love Stephen Yeun in this movie, like trying to bring all the workers together to form a union and stuff like that. And Lakeith Stanfield's journey going up like the social ladder by using a white voice, you know, is very powerful. And I just love Boots Riley's style, man. I don't think his second film has come out yet, but I just his style is so dreamlike, you know. The way he cuts between locations and stuff like that, it's hard to explain, but it reminds me a lot of movies. Who directed Tokyo Godfathers?
Masha.
I know his last name is Kano because he did Perfect Blue. It reminded me of Perfect Blue in the way how anime sometimes animates characters in like a mental state and how they transfer from location to location. And I love the score to this film. It's a very fucking weird film, but I think its weirdness sort of brings out the absurdity in modern day capitalism. And I was so surprised when I saw this film for the first time in 2018. What?
Satoshi Kon.
Yeah, Satoshi Kano. Yeah, great film. Blindspotting. What do you guys think?
Not Blindspotting.
Did you say Blindspotting?
Oh, fuck.
Sorry to bother you.
The reason why, okay, I have my notes here, and I was going down our list, and I said, Blindspotting. What do you guys think? No, sorry to bother you. What do you guys think?
I saw this movie in theaters, and I remember everybody's discourse around the movie.
Yeah.
Nobody, at least in my theater, loved that movie except for me. They all thought it was super weird, and they didn't want to contemplate with the tough realities the film has to face. But I was thinking this is the greatest critique of corporations in the 21st century so far.
Yeah.
Like, out of any film. That doesn't necessarily mean I agree with it in a lot of manners. I do agree with some of it. But, like, Ethan and I have very different philosophical points in regards to how to run an economy. However, I do agree with him in points about unions and helping people out. And Stephen Yeun doing what he's doing and starting that, like, revolution within the workplace is quite amazing. But yeah, it's a really interesting and unique film. I would say it's America's. I wish Boots Riley could do more, but he kind of said "fuck you" to the Hollywood system, so that's like that's kind of difficult for him to make more films like this. But he's
Right.
like a modern surrealist, right? He
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of one of my favorite directors, Luis Buñuel, who did a lot of
yeah.
film in France and Spain in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s that were
Sort
all
of a
about
poster child for the movement.
society, aristocracy, and a bunch of different things. So I get a lot of that sense. And though the ending is batshit crazy, there's so much you can take from it. So much.
Yeah. Another great director of visual metaphors with the weird developments of that film, you know.
Mhm.
The ending is just
Yeah. Chris, have you seen Sorry to Bother You?
No, I actually have not.
Oh,
But now that we've had this conversation,
yeah.
you guys basically pitched me this whole movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know anything about how the movie's ending or anything like that. I
Yeah.
just know two things. One, I love the concept, the alternate reality, the telemarketing, the voice thing, and all
Mhm.
that. That's like
Steven Yeun, one of your
and yeah,
favorites.
I was about to say Steven Yeun and Lakeith Stanfield in one movie. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
So, and that sounds great. I feel like that's a pairing like that's a like I haven't even seen it, but I can imagine if they share a scene, their chemistry is probably kind of good.
Chris.
Oh yeah.
You're gonna love both the script and the visuals of this movie. I
Yeah.
already
I've
know.
seen the visuals. I've referenced the visuals before,
And he hasn't seen the movie.
in before. I haven't seen the movie. I've seen the visuals. I used it in BuddyBot. Leave me alone. But yeah, I'm very intrigued, and like just the idea. Honestly, it's the idea that Steven Yeun and Lakeith are together. That sounds like that's a Chris Tucker Jackie Chan duo if I ever seen one. That I would love to see happen.
Is that racist?
And Armie Hammer's in it,
I'm-
and he's batshit crazy.
His
It's
best
probably
perform-
my favorite. Yeah,
Yeah.
his best performance of all time. Just
No,
because of
Lone
how-
Ranger.
Yep.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Terry Crews is in this.
Yep. Terry Crews is Lakeith's uncle. It's so.
I gotta
great.
see this movie. Holy
You
shit!
Patton
gotta watch
Oswalt,
it
Tessa
ASAP.
Thompson. Tessa
Danny
Thompson,
Glover, Patton Oswalt.
Yep.
David Cross, Danny Glover. Yeah, you said Danny Glover. There's a lot of people in that movie. That's
Oh, I would love to rewatch that movie with you, Chris. Honestly,
me too.
would you wait
Okay.
for January?
Yeah, I'll wait.
Yeah.
I can wait.
Okay. Hell yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, there's all of our
shall we?
films, everyone. Let's run down. This is no double stacks. We almost had one with Parasite, but Brandon changed his
Almost
mind.
had one on Blind Spotting as well. I changed my mind for that. Brand and I
yeah.
almost had a double, but we both changed our minds.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, then before we break down what our final stack's gonna be, let's run through again. Brandon, kick us off.
First Reformed, Snowpiercer, Blind Spotting.
Mine were Parasite, Fruitvale Station, and Gone Girl.
And mine was The Avengers, sort of the black sheep of this podcast. Tangerine and Sorry to Bother You.
You have this exploration of culture and race and like economy and political
Yeah.
stuff, and then you've got this like cultural phenomenon that is like just definitely determine the future of the industry, but does not fit at all.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, like tonally or anything.
So
It's pivotal for the generation in a different way.
yeah. So then,
Yeah.
do we want to make a stack that's sort of more specific into one aspect of the 2010s, or do we want to be a lot more broad?
I
You know?
think
That's what I was thinking. I have no idea how
I
we want
want
to
to
tackle
blend things.
Brandon has his eyes closed and he's wiggling his fingers around. I would like to blend things.
Here's what I
That's
mean by that. Here's
Brandon when he works at a Jamba Juice.
or Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like blending. We've got films that tackle race. We need to choose at least one. I think, and then we should do the same with like either religion or classism, or a mixture of the two. And then you could have a film that is very progressive in another way. Like I'm talking about regions of thought and the way we've changed over the course of the decade, essentially, and where we are going forward, right? So like for example, I'm not going to say this is our final stack or anything, but just as a
Mhm.
pitch, like First Reformed is this very religious and political film that tackles the environmental aspects of society going forward. Then you've got something like Sorry to Bother You, which tackles very much the economics and politics and social movements going forward. And then you've got something more centered specifically around like something like Blind Spotting or Fruitvale Station, carrying us forward into like the racial and social era going forward. So in that sense, you kind of get a taste of all three. but yet all three are very different films. Like
Yeah.
they aren't necessarily dramas, they're not necessarily comedies. Some straddle the line, and some are just like completely original. So something like that, I think, is how we should pitch it. Which means no
Let's see.
Avengers, unfortunately. That's too bad.
I mean, but that's a big aspect of movies in the 2010s. But
It is,
okay.
but it just feels wrong.
I know it just feels wrong having it in the stack, but okay, it's a
It feels
decade
so
we're talking
wrong
about.
that it is right. Let's put it
Yes,
in.
exactly.
No.
No. Is there anybody that has a film that they think needs to be on the stack?
Personally,
I think
Blindspotting.
I think Parasite should be on here.
Parasite.
I
would be great with Parasite and Blindspotting. Sort of Parasite being this more classist narrative of the 2010s, and then Blindspotting being sort of a little also classist but more racial, you know?
Yeah, and I also think like Parasite has like a racial side to it in the sense of like the industry and the impact it has on it.
Yeah,
because it proves something.
Yeah,
it's significant in that regard.
Then I'd want to put in First Reformed or Sorry to Bother You personally.
What about Tangerine?
I just haven't seen it, so it's hard for me to comment on it, especially because like I've seen Sean Baker's other film, but like as like Tori shared with you, I mean there is like some aspects of the film that maybe aren't
right. Okay.
You know, and like otherwise I would be totally on board with that idea, because the idea of queerness in modern cinema, maybe if we had picked something like Portrait of a Lady, but that technically was this year, right?
I wanted to put Moonlight on my list, but we've already used it for the coming of age, so I couldn't.
Yeah, and Portrait was 2019. Actually, no, yeah, Portrait was 2019.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Well,
should we lock in two of them?
Let's lock in. Should we lock in?
Chris, what do you think?
Well, I have a proposal.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Dad. What if we did?
Daddy?
Hang on 1 second. God, this is okay. I got it. Okay, wait. This might sound ignorant of me, but in Sorry to Bother You is Lakeith being a black person. Is that a significant part of its narrative? Like, is it a film tackling racial issues?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with that said, I'm wondering, like, what if we did this? Parasite, First Reformed, and Sorry to Bother You. I think those tackle three tenets of what defined the 2010s very well. Parasite being social economics, First Reformed being religion, corporation, and environmentalism.
Yeah.
Sorry to Bother You, race relations, and corporation as well.
Okay.
And many more, but I don't know very much about that movie.
No, you're right. And I think they kind of blend well together. Like if you start with First Reformed, you can move into Sorry to Bother You, and and then Sorry to Bother You is like a perfect transition into Parasite.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Interestingly, the stack is only in the last 2 years of the decade.
This is what I said at the beginning of the
Great couple years.
I'm not saying
these films. I mean, it kind of makes sense because they're more retrospective of the decade. You know.
Meaningful.
Okay. Let's do it. How are we going to order this thing?
That's the order.
First Reformed, Sorry to Bother You, Parasite.
Yes.
I think.
Okay. Sounds good.
Which movie would be the worst to be intoxicated to watch?
All of them. The best.
Which one's
painful? I think Parasite would be fun to watch intoxicated.
Parasite might be, yeah. I think First Reformed might be really tough.
Yeah, that would be tough because you're just like, fuck this world, fuck my life.
No. You guys, it's like Evangelion. It's like the same thing. Also.
Yeah, I would say fuck this world, fuck my life if I watched Evangelion drunk. Are you kidding me?
I think if you watch First Reformed High, you'd find new appreciation for the floating scene.
I would get scared by it.
Probably, yeah. Honestly, yeah. I would probably find you appreciated for it.
But also, no, Sorry to Bother You would be kind of fun, but it's also really... Chris, there's something in the third act you don't want to witness,
I want to see Chris's reaction to that. Chris, don't look up anything about this movie because I want to see you.
I'm not going to look up anything.
What your thoughts are on it. Okay. This is another unique list of three films.
But I love this list. It's a very holistic list, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Let's run it down of Stack's official quintessential films of the 2010s. Brandon, kick us off with our first film.
Yes, our first film today is First Reformed, a great account of how religion and faith has been altered by mass media and the idea that the environment and corporations are also changing before our very eyes. Wonderful movie, depressing movie. Just watch it.
And our next film is Boots Riley's debut feature, Sorry to Bother You. What I believe is a quintessential modern Marxist piece of art that depicts sort of the modern worker's struggle and how they want to overcome these struggles, and by sort of exploring this corrupt system and exploring how people are trying to solve this corruption. Sorry about you.
And our final film is a 2019 film directed by Bong Joon-ho, winning Best Picture, and the first non-English film to win Best Picture in the history of the Oscars. It is Parasite, a incredible film detailing the story of two families on opposite ends of the economic spectrum as they fight for their place in the world, and you begin to deconstruct how the economic ladder works, and is one of the most entertaining and thought-provoking films of this decade.
And there it is, everyone. There is the stack. I hope you check out, honestly, all of these films. We talked about a wide variety, especially me, with Avengers. But I think all of these films are quite excellent. And I encourage you all to, once again, watch them. And like I said last episode, let me know what you think are the greatest films of the 2010s. Like, which ones stood out to you the most? Let us know on any social media or in the comments below on YouTube. And yeah, boys, that'll be it. What are you laughing at?
No, we don't care.
Oh, we don't care? Yeah, I don't care. Bye.